Hello, year five. I bet you didn't think you were going to see my face this soon. I have jumped on the bandwagon. I've watched Miss O'Prea's amazing reading, and I thought I would start reading a book to you that we may or may not get onto into the summer term. The book we're due to be looking at is actually called There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. This is going to be back to front for you, but that's what it says. It is from the author called Louis Sachar. He also wrote the novel called Holes, which was made into a film as well. I know some children in my class had already have watched that already. And I thought I'd start by reading you the blurb. And I'm going to read just the first chapter today. And then what we'll start doing from kind of next week is I'll just do a chapter a day, and I'll give you some kind of retrieval and inference questions to go along with it, just to keep your comprehension tip-top. Okay, so Bradley Chalkers tells lies. He's been to the White House. He hasn't. He likes to eat dog food. He hasn't. His only friends are toy animals. Well, actually. No one likes Bradley. No one, that is, except for the new boy, Jeff, and the school counsellor, Carla. They appreciate this far-fetched stories. They think he's kind and generous. If only Bradley felt the same way. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is believing in yourself. So, quite an interesting sounding book there. Let's get started. He's written lots and lots of other books as well. Okay, so this was originally published 2016, this book was published. Okay, so chapter number 1 is only a few pages long, so I won't bore you with my voice for too long, but do check back each day, and like I say, I'll be adding chapter by chapter, so you can listen to my wonderful voice, like I'm sure you're all missing very much. Bradley Chalkers sat at his desk in the back of the room, last seat, last row. No one sat at the desk next to him or at the one in front of him. He was an island. If he could have, he would have sat in the closet. Then he could shut the door so he wouldn't have to listen to Mrs. Ebel. He didn't think she'd mind. She'd probably like it better that way too. So would the rest of the class. All in all, he thought everyone would be much happier if he sat in the closet, but unfortunately his desk didn't fit. Class, said Mrs. Ebel, I would like you all to meet Jeff Fishkin. Jeff has just moved here from Washington, D.C., which, as you know, is our nation's capital. Bradley looked up at the new kid who was standing at the front of the room next to Mrs. Ebel. Why don't you tell the class a little bit about yourself, Jeff? Urged Mrs. Ebel. The new kid shrugged. There's no reason to be shy, said Mrs. Ebel. The new kid mumbled something, but Bradley couldn't hear what it was. Have you been to the White House, Jeff? Mrs. Ebel asked. I'm sure that the class would be very interested to hear about that. No, I've never been there, the new kid said very quickly as he shook his head. Mrs. Ebel smiled at him. Well, I guess we'd better find you a place to sit. She looked around the room. I don't see any place except, I suppose you could sit there at the back. No, not next to Bradley, a girl in the front row exclaimed. At least it's better than in front of Bradley, said the boy next to her. Mrs. Ebel frowned. She turned to Jeff. I'm sorry, but there are no empty desks. I don't mind where I sit, Jeff mumbled. Well, nobody likes sitting there, said Mrs. Ebel. That's right, Bradley spoke up. Nobody likes sitting next to me. He smiled in a strange smile. It stretched his mouth so wide it was hard to tell whether it was a smile or a frown. He stared at Jeff with bulging eyes as Jeff awkwardly sat down next to him. Jeff smiled back at him, and so he looked away. As Mrs. Ebel began the lesson, Bradley took out a pencil and a piece of paper and scribbled. He scribbled most of the morning, and sometimes on the paper and sometimes on his desk. Sometimes he scribbled so hard that his pencil broke. Every time that happened, he laughed. Then he'd tape the broken point to one of the gobs of junk in his desk, sharpen his pencil, and scribble again. His desk was full of little wads of torn paper, pencil points, chewed erasers, and other unrecognisable stuff, all taped together. Mrs. Ebble handed back a language test. Most of you did very well, she said. I was very pleased. There were 14 A's and the rest B's. Of course, there was one F, but... She shrugged her shoulders. Bradley held up his test for everyone to see and smiled that same distorted smile. As Mrs. Ebble went over the correct answers with the class, Bradley took out his pair of scissors and very carefully cut his test paper into tiny squares. When the bell rang for recess, he put on his red jacket and walked outside, alone. Hey, Bradley, wait up, somebody called after him. Startled, he turned around. Jeff, the new kid, hurried alongside him. Hi, said Jeff. Bradley stared at him in amazement. Jeff smiled. I don't mind sitting next to you, he said. Really? Bradley didn't know what to say. I have been to the White House, Jeff admitted. If you want, I'll tell you about it. Bradley thought for a moment and then said, Give me $1 or I'll spit on you. And that's a lovely ending to chapter 1. So, quite short chapters in this book. All I want you to think about just with this first chapter is how the characters have changed from maybe the beginning of the me reading to the end. How the setting description maybe was described as well. And just think about the different characters we know about so far, so that then that becomes easier when we go on to our next chapter. So I will do this, like I say, every day or every other day maybe, depending on what kind of work we've got set for our English learning. And then we'll start next week at having a little look at some comprehension and some questions to go along with it. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring. I hope it gives your mums and dads a little bit of a rest from the homeschooling that I'm sure is very full on, a big change at the moment. But I'm looking forward to seeing you all, hopefully sooner rather than later. Have a lovely day.